community. We wanted to be able to grow our own doctors and nurses and healthcare workers, to not just have at the hospital, but to deploy across our service area. I will jump to Barb in just a minute, but I want to say a few things about Novant. I knew very little about Novant when I started this process. I knew a lot about Atrium and I knew a lot about Duke, but I was unaware of specifics about Novant. I was completely unprepared for how impressed I was from the very first meeting we had. They impressed me with their culture, with their grasp of how modern healthcare will be managed. They impressed me with their scrappiness. Novant partnered with lots of drugstores a long time ago, because what they wanted was all the different points of delivery so that they could fill out the data that they had on their population, because they're very focused on how you improve the health of the population that you serve. I was blown away with their accomplishments in health equity. They've received the most prestigious award in the country in the last 2 years for what they do in health equity. I found them to be egalitarian and patient-centered. And when they came back to the table with us and had added the UNC partnership, which gave us everything that we had wanted with that medical education component, it was like the dream team. It was a very, very easy decision, and it was an exciting decision because I think we can transform the care of this region. And while we are doing that, we will be building a vibrant medical school that's going to be right here. It's going to grow into, I think, a significant campus for UNC School of Medicine, which will help us, I think, develop a healthcare hub here. And that will impact our economy. So I think that this partnership is thrilling. And with that, I will ask Barb to jump in and continue the conversation.
Thank you, Hannah. It is great to see so many of you that I recognize. I won't try to say all of them, but it's fun to see some smiling faces again. And Lynn, thank you for inviting us. I appreciate it very much. This has been a really interesting ride. When we first started and and Spence and I were picked as chairs, I'm sure Spence started to wonder what in the world his co-chair would be like, as I did, since I watched him inhale M&Ms very quickly and was greatly concerned about the sugar level and how we were going to run these meetings. But we survived, and I think have gotten a great respect. I have learned so much about politics and banking and financing from Spence, and hopefully I've been able to share some healthcare. I have been in healthcare my whole adult life. Dr. Virginia Adams gently told me, and she was right, that I've been in it for over 4 decades. It sounds like a really long time. In that, I have done a lot of acquisitions and mergers and facilitated a lot of organizations coming together, as well as leading several organizations. So I came in with a little more healthcare, but as Hannah just said, the past is very different than where we're going in the future. So the opportunity to serve on New Hanover's board is wonderful. I've had a great opportunity to learn the strategic plan of the hospital and where we're going. Then you add on top of that the Partnership Advisory Group, the total of 21 members, community members, trustees, physicians, and the leadership of New Hanover Regional and the county all came together over 9 months ago to begin this process. We've had at least 15 PAG meetings over that time. We've also had work groups which subdivided into areas to look at more concentrated areas within the analysis. We've looked at status quo, we've looked at restructuring, and then we looked at the RFPs that went out. I think it was 16 people in the end, 16 organizations, but we narrowed it down to the 3 top ones, which all of you know were Atrium, Duke, and Novant. As Hannah mentioned, when Novant came back to the table with UNC, they really came out with a very strong proposal. So what we did was we evaluated first status quo and system co, or reorganizing to just a partnership in general, and found exactly what Hannah said, that we really could not move forward to be a regional provider in the 7 counties on our own. And that was pre-COVID, so that was reinforced as we moved along in the process, and realized the shortages and the issues that you have with getting equipment and getting supplies. Sorry, that's one of our chatty dogs in the background. Along with that, we then said, okay, status quo as is just doesn't work. How do we evaluate these partnerships? And we went in depth in small groups based on the 10 goals of the hospital, and looked at several key areas. We looked at improving access, we looked at advancing quality, we looked at health equity, we looked at supporting our staff, looked at how we participate with providers. We talked about driving quality care through continuum. We looked at the level and scope of care. We looked at long-term financial security, strategic positioning, and governance. And all of these were critical to us. But you'll notice that of those 10, only one of those was financially focused. And I think what really stood out in the end, after we did 12 site visits and had 3 presentations of each of the top ones to the PAG, but then also had presentations to the New Hanover board, is that the culture and the fit of Novant just stood out so much higher than the others. And it really had to do with a lot of what Hannah just mentioned relative to their commitment to diversity in their staff, as well as looking at social determinants of health. And they have some award-winning programs that we just really couldn't get to on our own, both from a resource commitment financially, but also from a staffing standpoint. So we really felt very strongly about that and that opportunity to move forward with them. We also had a fit with them just from a people standpoint and a leadership standpoint. They completely understood that we wanted as much local control as we could possibly have, and acknowledged, and it's in our letter of intent, that any of the decisions relative to staffing, physician, not just the contract for the New Hanover Medical Group, but the private physicians that are on staff, all go through NHRMC's board and have that opportunity to be decided at this level. So we have exciting with that, but something that's very unique that I never experienced in my mergers and acquisitions was that they gave us 2 seats on their board. And that is a really unusual commitment. But the reason is they see us as a partner and as a hub for their business. They don't see us as an acquired facility that they had to take over because we weren't successful on our own. They see a lot of the value of what we've been able to develop and produce on our own, and how we've been able to grow from that very small community hospital into a regional system. So their commitment to us has been extensive relative to understanding the need for the decisions to be made locally for the healthcare that we provide. They've also given us great opportunity with UNC. If I remember right, and you guys can correct me, it's a 21-year commitment to start off with the UNC School of Medicine. And what's exciting is we are already working with them very closely. And this just further commits to the overall graduate medical education and the academic affiliation. It's a 25-year initial commitment, my apologies. So we're looking at maintaining the academic affiliation with the UNC School of Medicine, continuing developing the residencies and fellowship programs, developing advanced practice providers, bringing some of those schools into UNCW, and really looking at having the opportunity to expand our base here from an academic standpoint, but then the opportunity for clinical providers to stay in our region. So we're very excited about that. So we're excited about becoming a branch campus from the health profession side of what UNC offers. And it's going to help us a lot with staffing. It's going to help us a lot bringing employees into the community. And it's going to help us build our physician base as we grow in many of these areas. They've also committed to expanding our pediatric program, which has off to a great start, but doesn't have the resources and the commitment that it needs to become a strong player for us, so that we don't have to take our children up to the Raleigh-Durham area or anywhere else. So a lot of excitement about the UNC side of it too. So I think I've covered a lot. The hard thing for me is I don't know how to describe culture, but I can tell you that the fit that I felt when I was there, when I met with the CEO and I met with the leadership team and the physician leaders, was just significant. And when I talked to staff, I felt very, very positive about the fact that they recognize we have our act together here in this region. We just need the resources to continue to grow as our region grows. And so those are kind of my points. I'd be delighted in the end to answer questions. I think, Hannah, you wanted to move on from there to Spence to talk about the financials? You want to do that? All right, Spence, it's all yours.
Spence, please unmute your audio so that we can hear you. Spence, if you can hear me, please unmute your audio. I know he's been on the call. I've seen it.
I'll text him. Hold on.
We have 76 people participating today, which I think is a record for us. So clearly there's great interest in this topic.
Steve, I might have hurt his feelings by talking about the M&Ms.
Well,
I can't tell on my laptop. Is he on the screen anywhere?
I think he took his screen down and he just says iPhone now.
Okay. Maybe he's transitioning. Maybe he had a problem.
Yeah.
Is he on his iPhone?
Yes.
Barb, do you? Okay, go ahead, Glenn.
I was just going to say, Spence, if you wanted to call me, or I'll put you on the speakerphone. I'll put you on the speaker.
I can say a few more things if you want me to along the way.
I think it would be good if you could share a little bit about the providers and any and Novant's willingness to work with what we have in place.
Right, I'd be glad to. Just kind of on a high level, they've committed to ensuring the medical staff will remain substantially unchanged in an open medical staff. They will not make any material changes to privileges, existing bylaws, or agreements that are with the groups that provide services at the hospital. They've also looked at the employment agreements and keeping them the same for a minimum of 3 years, and are looking to do the same with those independent groups. They've been really focused a lot on quality metrics and emerging technology. They have an amazing platform for their virtual healthcare that they will bring to us. And they have quality metrics. Even though we have them, theirs are well beyond ours. And I will tell you, the neat thing for me, and Rhonda may know this better than I do because she's been on the quality committee longer than I have. Sorry to put you on the spot, Rhonda, but we always led Atrium in the quality measures on an annual basis. And it really was frustrating to me because the bar was always set below where we were. And I think the interesting thing on the measures and the commitments from Novant is they really are looking at quality and safety metrics that I think can take us to the next level. Rhonda, is that fair to say? As far as the atrium side, would you at least agree with
Right,
that?
I would agree with you on that point, Barb. Absolutely. We have very tough measures, and we keep increasing our metrics regarding quality. So we're moving in the right direction all the time.
And I think the support of a system like Novant can help us even more. Same thing, clinical research. While we've got some great starts on that, having UNC and Novant together, we're going to look at the expertise, the resources, the infrastructure of research. That is a great support to our medical community. And they really are able to support the physicians from that aspect, along with just technology and just sort of emerging innovative solutions that Novant has the infrastructure to do that we haven't done on our own. So I think from a medical staff standpoint, that's critical. There's probably one other piece that I think Hannah may have been referring to, and that is they are even willing to have Atrium manage our medical group for an extended period if that's what we want. And so a lot of people misunderstand, Atrium does not own New Hanover Regional Medical Group. They manage them for us. And so there's an opportunity there to evolve over a period of time, but really look and see what the best way is to manage that group going forward. So lots of willingness on their part to work with us. Again, I think because we're coming in from an approach of strength, whereas many hospitals, when they come in to look at any kind of a partnership, are oftentimes in dire straits and challenged to have any leverage in the relationships and in the discussions and negotiations going forward. Lynn's smiling. I know she's probably talking to Spence. I can keep going forever if you want me to.
Or if you want, Lynn, we can take questions. I got a text from Spence saying that he was on his cell.
I've got him on the phone.
Okay.
So hold on just a minute. Okay, I've got him on speaker. And Spence, if you'll take it away.
Hey, well, listen, everybody. I am so sorry. I was with you, and then when I tried to unmute, my cell phone wouldn't allow me to do that, and I'm sure there's massive user error involved in that. Can Lynn, can everybody hear me okay now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I see nodding heads. Take it away, Spence.
All right, good. Well, y'all are probably better off from not having to see me anyway. I do appreciate everybody inviting me. I appreciate the kind things that Barb said about our partnership and about the politics. I'll tell you that the only thing I learned about politics is being smart enough to get out of it. I will say that I did learn in politics to make sure you're clear with people about facts and opinion. And as I'm walking through this, I'll certainly do that. It has, in all candor and honesty, it's been one of the great blessings and privileges of my life to work with Barb Biehner and Hannah and the other members of the advisory group in this. My story is similar to Hannah's. I started as a true layperson skeptic with very little information about healthcare in the hospital, with the same interest that probably everybody on this Zoom meeting had, and that is the interest in what's going on with our hospital. I wanted to be a part of it and do what I could to help it, which is how I got involved. But like Hannah, I started as a true skeptic and have evolved through the process to a firm, undoubting believer that we are doing the absolute right thing, and the right partner is Novant, along with UNC Health and Medical Center. So I have evolved as well, and Hannah did a really nice job of explaining some of her evolution. I would share that. They, after hearing the good quality information from them, they leave the geeky financial information to me. So I apologize that you're going to have to walk through that, but I'm going to turn my attention to the financial side of it, which is a part to the partnership I felt like I could bring some value to. So I'll hit three things, and one is understanding the needs of the hospital, and Hannah and Barb have both very, very well identified those. I'll touch on them again. Talk about the current financial situation of the hospital in very fairly broad terms, and then talk about Novant and what they bring, and all three really, but more specifically Novant and what they bring to us from a financial perspective, and how that makes sense. You know, you heard Barb and Hannah in one way or another identified that, you know, the capital needs to provide health care to this region that it deserves. You know, health care is probably our most precious infrastructure. You know, we always talk about roads and water and sewer and schools, and they're all very important, but nothing's more important than health care. And this is our most vital infrastructure that has to evolve for all of us, for the entire region, particularly a growing region like this. So the capital needs are evolving, you know, almost, I won't say exponentially, but really faster than New Hanover Regional Medical Center has the internal cash flow and internal capacity to keep up with it. So that's a really huge point. And the smaller point, but also an important one, is that capital needs aside, the cash flow stabilization and sustainable stabilization of the cash flow of this hospital for the generation to come. We've done a very good job in the 53 years we've been here, but you heard the changes that both Barb and Hannah identified, and those bring variables into play, and we really don't know how they will impact us. But it is important for us, and it is our responsibility. I know it's the trustees and the county commissioners' fiduciary responsibility to make sure that this medical center is sustainable, even setting the capital needs aside. So those two things are really the foundation of the need of the Hanover Regional Medical Center. So, you know, we've heard some conversation about why do we want to do this. The hospital is in excellent financial shape. And I would answer that as absolutely correct. This is a very well-run, financially stable medical center at this point. But I do think it's important to peel the onion back a little bit and talk about what's underneath that.
Lynn, you're muted.
COVID, we had roughly 220 days of cash. That sounds like a lot of money, but the rating agencies, Moody, who rates us, gives us high marks in every area except cash on hand. I hate to use the word criticize, but they note every year that their target for our cash on hand is significantly higher, probably, you know, 50 to 100 more days, which is millions and millions of dollars more. That's just the nature of healthcare. That's the nature of hospitals, and that's the amount of cash on hand that is really required by the rating agencies, but it's required by common sense for us as the community to guard against the COVID outbreak where we have to shut down non-essential services, hurricanes, which had shut down the hospital 2 years ago and a little bit last year. Those kind of things, we need to have more cash on hand probably than others, and we frankly don't. And so that's an important aspect to understand, is that's really a consideration. The second thing is our cash flow. And, you know, we hear that the hospital had $100 million in hospitals nonprofits don't have profit, but in excess cash flow last year, and that sounds like a really big number, and that is my understanding is that's the best that the hospital has ever done from a one-year cash flow, and it sounds really, really great, but it's important to understand what makes that up. And the first thing I'll say is that last year was $100 million. It looks like from the projections this year due to COVID and Lord knows we'll pray not having a hurricane, but just due to COVID, we'll probably break even this year. So that's how fast this thing can change. It costs the hospital over $3 million a day just to operate. So when you cut out essential services like we're cut out through COVID, you know, you're clipping $3 million a day. And yet you're still having to serve the basic needs, the things that frankly cost money that the hospital doesn't have positive cash flow on, such as the emergency room and those kind of things. So, you know, we had $100 million in cash flow last year, probably break even this year. But let's take the $100 million and say, in a perfect world, that would continue. Half of that $100 million, $50 million, comes to us through the federal government through a sole provider arrangement. I believe it's a Medicare system. I'm not sure which system, but I think it's the federal government sort of subsidy for a sole provider hospital like us to make sure that we have the money to provide the services to everybody that needs it. And the only reason we get that is because we're the sole provider. If this were a situation where there were two medical centers in New Hanover County, $50 million would come off the New Hanover Regional Medical Center bottom line day one. And so even though that's a blessing that we have that, and it's the right thing to do, and it's the right thing for us to receive, we just need to understand where it comes from. And even though we don't see that going away, it is not guaranteed money. And so that creates that situation. Second thing to understand is, what does it take just to keep up with the routine capital needs of the hospital? Replacing small equipment, replacing things that wear out. I'm not talking about building new buildings. We're talking about, equipment that wears out. So the depreciation of our hospital is about $54 million a year. And that's the accounting methodology of what wears out. And that's probably the best barometer we could use for what you have to replace. And through Moody's, they say that typically hospitals need to have routine capital expenditures of about 30% more than your depreciation. So that would be roughly $70 million a year. So it would take $70 million of our $100 million, not even discounting that we could lose 50, just to keep up with the routine depreciation of equipment, stuff that wears out, stuff you got to do. The long-term strategic plan bakes in $60 million a year, I believe, is what the leadership has. And so whether it's 50, 60, or 70, it's a big number. So I share that just so we can all have a good understanding of what does $100 million buy you today, right? I mean, it's real money in some circles, but $100 million in this case could go to zero very quickly. And it's just a consideration we all need to understand where that comes from. So before we factor in the capital needs to provide to eliminate the disparities of health, to provide for health equity, to provide for behavioral and mental health needs, to work against the opioid crisis that we all know is facing us, before we do that, that's the cash flow situation that we stand right now. The other thing is, what's our ability to borrow money? And a hospital is no different than your household. You know how much money you can borrow to buy a car. You know how much money you can borrow to buy a house. You evaluate your budget to make sure that you don't overspend, that you don't over leverage. And the last thing that we want as a community is to have an over leveraged hospital, because that is, you have an over leveraged hospital with the cash flow variables, or not really variables, but the cash flow situation that I just described. That is a perfect scenario for losing your hospital with no money. In other words, you hear of all the community hospitals going out of business or being forced to be absorbed by another hospital all over the country, and last year was a record bankruptcies for hospitals. When you hear that, it's because the hospitals that are in that situation, they don't have the revenue and they've over leveraged. So we don't want our hospital over leveraged any more than you want your household over leveraged. We have about $350 million in debt, and based on our being New Hanover Regional Medical Center, internal evaluation through our financial team, we feel like we have the ability to borrow about $150 million without jeopardizing our cash flow and jeopardizing our bond rating. Moody's agrees with that. So shifting back to the capital needs, so we've got about $150 million that we could use to expand, grow, get out into the community the way Hannah and Barb both described, and the way healthcare is evolving right now. That's what we have. Our strategic plan for the hospital over the next, Barb will correct me, 10 or 15 years, calls for 1.3 to $1.5 billion in non-recurring capital, not the replacement of equipment capital I talked about, but really growth, non-recurring capital expenses, $1.5 billion, and we've got the ability to borrow $150 million. So, you know, we can play semantics with the strategic plan all we want to, but what I'm telling you is we can fund 10% of it. And so whether the full strategic plan is necessary, I believe it is, but you could argue that point all day, whether it's 3/4, half, a quarter, we don't have the borrowing capacity nor the cash to meet those needs. It just does not exist. And so that's where we got as a group as far as status quo does not work. And frankly, internal restructuring, partnership, things that don't bring capital to us, don't bring more cash flow to us, are not viable decisions here. And so therefore, that's part of our evolution. And I'm speaking from the financial standpoint. Part of our evolution is we go, okay, we've need to do all these improvements for the health and the welfare of our community, but from a financial standpoint, you know, we've got to make some decisions here. And the easy decision is to do nothing. It always is the easy decision. The hard decision is to accept the criticism that our trustees and our county commissioners took a year ago and ask the hard questions. We had the advantage of coming in with a blank piece of paper saying, okay, what's the best thing to do? And we're working from a financial standpoint. At this point, my rambling on to you folks is that we've gotten, clearly we can't stay the same. It makes no sense. And we've got to find a way to inject capital into this community, into the healthcare of this community, which led us to, okay, let's look at these responses. And we got 6 back from 6 of the best healthcare organizations in the southeastern part of the United States, and we narrowed it to 3. And the first thing we did, we narrowed it to 3 because we got and I'm sure y'all spent some time with the proposals, but you know they range from cash up front from $600 million to $1.5 billion, and then plus that's just cash up front, and then the capital outlay requirements beyond that. You know, we hired an outside independent third party financial analyst to help us, even though it sounds like I know what I'm talking about, but I really don't. So we hired Pondering Company to really do an analysis on all 3 of these outfits, because the first thing said, well, they got to be able to afford this. What can they do it?
Lynn,
Yes.
I'm gonna get you to let Spence know that we're just about out of time.
And one thing I'll say about when we're analyzing a 3,
Sorry.
the question was, doesn't it appear that Novant is offering a lot more than the other 2, so maybe they're an outlier? I argued from the beginning that was not the case. Based on the cash flow of the hospital and the value it brings, the other 2 were outliers, and Novant was market price. And the simple way to analyze that is you look at what HCA offered for us. Now, HCA is a for-profit hospital, and we've all heard the stories of the challenges up in Asheville.
Spence.
Yes.
Spence, I hate to interrupt. We are going to need to end the meeting. However, if we want to pick this line of thought up after that, we can absolutely do that. Is that okay?
Okay. Sorry to run on so long.
No. I think it's great. But what we'll do is also, I know the membership may have questions for you all. So if you'll hang on, but please allow us to just end the meeting. Okay, great.
Let's do just what you said, Lynn. I want to thank all of our speakers today. That was another wonderful amount of information. Hannah and Barbara and Spence, Lynn, thanks for facilitating Spence being back on the line with us. An overwhelming amount of information, but very, very good explanation, even to another layperson. We really appreciate y'all being here and explaining what you've seen over your time participating in this process. If you don't mind staying on, and if Cleve, can we leave this open a little bit for questions after we adjourn the meeting?
Sure. What we may want to do, though, is do the 4-way test, and then if people want to stay,
that's right.
We can take questions, as long as we have questions and as long as our guests can be here.
That's wonderful, because I know there's
almost 1:30. I mean.
Yeah. So let's let me say a final thing. Next week, our speaker will be Tony Rivenbark as the executive director of Thalian Hall. So we've got another good speaker set up. And again, I appreciate everybody being here today. I did see 81 participants on this for a short minute today, and I appreciate y'all being here. Hope everybody will be back next week. let's adjourn. If Cleve, can you unmute everybody?
Yes, I can. Give me a second.
I have on it on Mayfair.
Everybody is
Wonderful.
unmuted.
Yeah, it's
No.
half the size of this, but it's
Everybody's
As you
unmuted. We're
can
gonna,
tell.
as you can tell, we're gonna finish with the 4 things that we
Keller
think,
Williams.
say, and do. Number 1.
Is it the truth?
Number 2.
Is it fair to all concerned?
Number 3.
Will, goodwill, and better friendships?
Number 4.
Beneficial
To all concerned. Rotary. And we adjourn. And please stick by if you'd like to ask Hannah, Barbara, or Spence any questions if they have time to stick with us. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Okay, this is Cleve again. I hope a number of people will stay. As Robbie mentioned, we had 81 guests at one time. Right now, we're down to 47, and it keeps dropping. But obviously, there's some people who want to be part of this. And what I'm going to suggest we do is, as we've done before, if you have a question, open up the participant screen so that you can click on the raise hand, blue hand, the little blue icon of a hand, and we'll call on you in the order in which these come in. I see we have a question from Lynne. Lynne, did you mean for that to be there? Lynne Boney?
No, sorry, I don't have a
Okay.
question.
All right, I'll
Thank
take
you.
yours. We're going to start with John Meyer. John, would you please unmute your audio and ask your question? John, go ahead, please.
Well, I'll just state briefly, the PAG is essentially the hospitals and the county administration's self-selected group. So you have that against you in persuading the public to take you seriously. And I also have to say, you did not do yourselves any favors in political terms by refusing to appear in public forums alongside some of your critics. But that gets me to my primary point. Polls show that New Hanover County residents are decisively against either a sale or a partnership of our hospital. So despite the very expensive advertising campaign that we're seeing, and those full page ads aren't cheap, your group has failed to sell your case to the public. Are you so certain of yourselves that you're so directly willing to flout the will of the hospital's actual owners rather than giving this the time it takes to really make the public case and have the public with you, rather than just say, we're the experts, we have heard from the experts, trust us?
Hey, Lynn, I'm actually back on now. I apologize for all that, but I made it back on. So if you want, I'll be glad to take that, John. I mean, Barb and Hannah, if y'all want it.
Well, I'll be glad to. Let me start, and if you want to jump in. I missed, this was John Myers. Was that the name of it? My screen's gone now. So thank you for the question. And we are all very aware that there has been a lot of criticism in the process, and that, you know, there are a lot of people that believe that it was stacked from the beginning. All I can talk about and address is the process that I was part of. I didn't carry anybody's water. I was not unwilling at any point to appear with anyone, and I think that certainly Jean Merritt will attest to that. But I do think that our work and COVID made so much of what we were doing a lot more difficult for the public to follow, because until the very end, we did not have public hearings. It was hard for people to come to our meetings. We did the best that we could, but we felt that we had said that we would complete this in 9 months, and we felt like we wanted to do that. We have a big job between now and when the county decides on the definitive agreement. Go out and educate people. And John, you are absolutely right. But what we are finding, and this is pretty much 100% of the time, because all of us have been, over the last few weeks, once we made a decision, all of us have been trying to meet with as many small groups as we possibly can. What we have found is that when we sit down and we educate them about the process. We go over why we came to these conclusions. 100% of the groups that we have met with have come out of it and said, we understand. This makes sense to us. So clearly we have to get out there, and over the next 3 months, we have to do that with more and more people. I am confident, and maybe I'm naive here. I believe that people, when they are more informed, they will understand this and understand the recommendation that we've made and why we believe this is the best path. But I certainly take your criticism constructively.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that. I get it. I really do. I appreciate it. I've had conversations. I see Steve Coggins there, and Dale and I have worked together on projects before, and Gene Merritt and I met I don't know how many times during this situation. I get it. I understand the question. One thing John raised, and I did want to address specifically, he talked about us not being willing, and I'll use this my word, not his, but debate this issue with, say, the Sabre Hospital Group or anybody else who wanted to. And we made it very clear. We started with a blank piece of paper, and I'm not going to defend my integrity. I'll just let my record stand for that. But we started, and I started with a blank piece of paper. So when we were invited to this group or any other, we didn't have a platform from which to debate. Gene and some others had a platform of, we don't want to sell the hospital regardless. Well, we had a platform of, we don't know. We want to ask the questions and understand. So that's kind of where we were. So it would not be a fruitful exercise to be at a meeting like this, because we had no point from which to debate. We had no platform. We had a blank piece of paper, and we learned for 9 months. Now, I did commit that at that point, when we come to a recommendation, which we have done, then we would love to have this kind of situation, or have a meeting where all points are presented, because we do have a recommendation and a platform from which we believe in. And I agree with Hannah. We've got a lot of work to do over the next number of months to support our work, to show our work, so to speak. And John referenced the I think he referenced or was inferring the poll that was taken that showed 70% of people didn't support selling the hospital. Well, I'll be honest, if somebody called me at home without any further information and said, do you support selling the hospital? I'm going to say no, because that's just a simple question, a simple answer. But as Hannah said, the more people we became educated, the more people we've talked to, the perception is different. If the question is, do you support selling the hospital if you have $2 billion to fight the opioid crisis, to battle mental health issues, to on and on and on, well, that's a different answer. So, polls are what they are. In my opinion, the groups that have voted, so to speak, from an informed standpoint, the Partnership Advisory Group spent 9 months. We voted 21-0 to do this. The trustees of the hospital have been working on this for years. They voted 16-1 in favor of this. The county commissioners, who have a fiduciary responsibility to do this right, voted 4-1. The Physicians Advisory Council, which was formed to give input, voted 25-0, and they ran a parallel path. That's 97% of that group who has done homework to support this. So I share that to support what Hannah said, is we've got a lot of communication information to do, but I certainly respect the feeling. I get it.
Okay, this is
Barb. I'll add one thing if I can.
Excuse me. I'm going to jump in here for just a minute, and please ask our questioners to keep your questions short and our responders to keep your answers short. We have a lot of people who still would like to ask a question, and we'll be here for a while, but I'll ask everybody just to be very conscious of the fact that we keep losing people from this meeting, and we're already well into overtime on our Rotary meeting. So I'm going to go ahead and call on Dale Smith, who was next. Excuse me, Bo Dean. I had promised Bo Dean that he would be next. Bo, go ahead and unmute your phone and ask your question, please.
Hi, and now I'm at my office. So I just wanted to quickly ask, so all three of you, I am, this has been the same for me, very transformative. What was the defining moment though? If you had one moment that really changed your mind, I mean, for me, it was the health equity issue. And I'm just so proud of y'all for going down that path of health equity. I can't even say it, but for you, if there was one thing that really turned the corner for you when you were on the PAG, that if you were in an elevator for somebody and you had to say, this was the moment for me, I knew this was going to turn the page, what was it?
I'll make a stab. I don't think that I had that one aha moment. And like I mentioned in the conversation, there was just a tipping point where it was a confluence of realizing where we were and our inability to do all the things that we wanted to do. And then a growing awareness of the kinds of things that other hospital systems are doing that I was oblivious to. I had no idea the kinds of things that were being done. And it was, all I could see was opportunity and possibility to improve the health of the population. And I'll let the others jump in and share if they had a one moment.
This is Barb. I think I would say it was the meeting with Novant when I realized the culture, the fit, and their commitment to our region. Their ability to have the data analytics to take us further in health equity, in social determinants of health, in virtual care, all those things just sort of all came together for me at that one point. And I think Hannah used the right word. I think it was a confluence of all those different pieces.
I think it was the health equity piece, at the same time realizing that all three, but particularly Novant, was going to give us a incredibly high level of local operational control that is almost unprecedented in these situations, where we could maintain that with our local board to run our hospital and then have the resources to address health equity and everything else.
Okay, thanks everybody. Let's go to a question from Dale Smith. Dale, you will need to unmute your audio in order to ask your question, please, but go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, thank you for the three of you to come and speak to Rotary. Congratulations on a fantastic job of leadership of the PAG, Barb and Spence. As you know, watched this very closely and done an excellent job. I don't really have a question. I want to remind people that this isn't really over, or at least that's what we're told, that it's not over. I do disagree. I think that even before the PAG, the hospital and the county should have done a much better job of selling this to the community, that there was even a need to proceed, and it would have made this whole process a lot smoother. Back to the point of that it isn't over yet, I really am pleased that the PAG is still involved and will carefully review the definitive agreement, because the devil's in the detail. And lots of things have been said and promised, but I'm still concerned about what it'll come down to in the end. If you want to comment on that, fine, but I don't really have a question. Thank you for coming to Rotary.
I have a comment. Thank you, Dale. I think that we will stay involved, and I think, I'm not even sure when our next meeting is, but I think that we'll be following this process closely, and we've got a number of other meetings. I want to say something about the value of having a group that has opposed this, where we're headed. I won't, because I never took it personally. I don't think there was a group that opposed the partnership advisory group. But there are so many communities in this state that would not have cared enough. The fact that you had a strong group that advocated for the hospital staying exactly the way it was, I think speaks volumes about where we live, about how this asset is cherished by the community. And I think I believe that it shows how vibrant this place called Wilmington is. So I also believed that not only would we probably never have existed had it not been because of that effort. I think we were appointed because early on there was a lot of controversy about why in the world this was even a discussion. And so the county decided that they needed to create this independent group. I think that the Save Our Hospital group played a big role there. And all along the way, and I say this out of great respect for Jean Merritt and all of those who have been part of this process, we've been challenged to look deeper, to ask tougher questions, to ask for a whole lot more information as we try to make our way. And I think it's been, I think it has enhanced the process, and I think that it made our work deeper. And so I'm grateful that we had a group that not just kept us on our toes, but made us keep questioning and never drink the Kool-Aid. And so I'm grateful.
Me too.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to our next person, who is Mimi. I assume that's Mimi Cunningham. Mimi, would you unmute your microphone and go ahead with your question, please? Mimi, you're still muted. Okay, Mimi, you're now unmuted, so please go ahead.
There. Thank you all for being here today. I have several thoughts. One is, I wasn't as strongly aware of the amount of local control we're going to have with our board. And that has been a big concern to me, because I thought we were only going to have the 2 positions on the big Novant board. So I think it would be a good selling point to let us know how much control that we're going to have. Another thought is how open this group is going to be. And I know, Hannah, you're probably very concerned about that, because as a public entity, we have more ability to require openness instead of secrecy. That concerns me. And the other thing is, how is Novant going to get the money if they have to borrow the $2 billion, as was told to us last week? How are they going to afford to do all the things that they talked about doing? Again, thanks for being here. It's been very enlightening.
Spence, why don't you talk about the money?
Yeah, Mimi, I'll just take the last part of that, because, you know, and I apologize for rambling on so much earlier, but we have spent a great deal of time on the finances. And that's certainly the first thing we looked at for all 3 respondents. And certainly, so we'll deal with Novant because that's who we've selected and who you question. Certainly with a transaction like this, they're going to borrow some money, just as if you bought a house, or any of us buy a house, we typically borrow money. If you buy companies buy other companies, they take a certain amount of leverage to do it. So they're certainly going to borrow money. When we in due diligence, we delved into that pretty deeply, and basically found, and they told us, and we found that they have been planning for an event like this for years. They have specifically been saying they have been deleveraging their balance sheet, paying down debt, and they now have a very, very low debt ratio for a medical center their size. They also have over $3 billion with a B dollars in cash. But like us, they need to hold on to a lot of that cash for the right reasons. So yeah, they'll leverage and borrow the money, but they have a lot of debt capacity. Whereas New Hanover Regional has 150 million, they have billions in debt capacity and cash flow. And then you layer on some cash flow from us and some synergies with the economies of scale they have, certainly down here with Brunswick. It puts them in a really nice position to repay this over a period of time. So all 3 of them are strong financial entities and would have no problem with it. But specifically with Novant, they have intentionally deleveraged themselves over the years to put themselves in this position. And one of the reasons that helped me kind of really select them is that they are treating us like the crown jewel. I think they all treat us like a gem, but we felt a little bit like a piece of a puzzle in one of the other 2s, whereas Novant, we're a hub. We are what they're after. We fit them very well. And so they've been planning this for years, and they can afford to borrow money.
like to add one little piece and also say hi to Mimi. I haven't seen you in years, Mimi, excited. And that is that I neglected to mention that New Brunswick will come under the board of New Hanover and be a part of that operation and responsibility. So the ability to plan for the region and manage the region will become responsibility of the board as we move forward.
All right, thank you. Our next questioner is John Lyon. John, I believe you're already unmuted, so go ahead with your question, please.
Sure. Not really a question, but just some positive comments. First off, I think the process, unlike some of the previous questioners, has been very transparent. And I really want to thank the PAG and the county commissioners and the hospital board. Anytime I've had questions throughout this process, I would pick up the phone, call a member of the PAG. Spence and I have talked. I've talked to folks on the board. I've talked to the county commissioners. Any question that I had, if they didn't have an answer, they found an answer and got it for me. So things really have been very transparent to folks who are willing to pick up the phone. Now, at the very beginning, I was very neutral on this process. Spence mentioned he was actually a skeptic and moved to a believer. I was neutral, and my major concerns were costs, healthcare metrics, and local control. And believe me, I've been asking those kind of questions all along, and those questions have been answered. And today, you really reinforce the local control issue. The fact that the hospital is going to be involved in hiring decisions is fantastic. 2 seats on their board really is unheard of, and that is just fantastic. The tie-in to UNC for education, expanded pediatric practice, the list goes on and on. You folks, the PAG has done a great job, and you've gotten the information from Gene Merritt and stuff on additional questions. You've dug out those answers. You put things to a vote. All those groups you said, where it's a vast majority of the folks being supportive, has been fantastic. The cash on hand that you talked about today, a lot of the folks in the public are getting misinformation. They hear that $100 million figure, and that's a big number to an individual like us. But to a hospital, that 100 million could disappear in a second. And so I think you've taken that into account. All in all, these proposals that came in, you've done a great job from a basic business analysis. And this was a business decision. Any good business looks at all aspects of the business, things that are going good, things that are going bad, and they want to improve even on those things that are going good. And I think you folks are doing a great job and moving us in the right direction. And I think our hospital will be better off, as good as we are now. I think we'll be better if this proposal proves, the devil in the details comes to fruition. So thank you very much, PAG. I think you've done a great job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, John, thank you for that comment. Next up, we have Laura Padgett. Laura, you'll need to unmute your microphone.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Okay.
indeed.
This is thank you to the 3 of you for being here, and I know the PAG has put in a good deal of work, and well, I'm not sure exactly my position yet. I hope it turns out the best that it possibly can. I appreciate everybody's work. This is a multi-part question about the openness of the hospital organization, the system, and it may not have been negotiated yet. And if that's the case, I hope you'll take some things into consideration. There was a comment that the hospital will remain as open to non-New Hanover Regional Group physicians as it currently is. Some of my questions and observations come from both my own and the experiences of friends with the hospital. And it seems to me that there had already been some limitations on access to physicians who are not part of NHRMC physician groups. And that is limited based on the system of using a hospitalist. And that person may determine which physicians may have the most contact with you. So I'd want to see that taken into account, and I'd like to know Novant's attitude about that and whether or not they are really open to non-affiliated physicians who are practicing in the area. And in line with that, there are existing, perhaps on and off, relationships between Duke Health and physicians groups here. And there are also relationships of patients in this area with Duke and other medical centers. How are those going to be treated? And what's going to become of those existing partnerships with Duke and maybe one or two other related medical groups such as ECU?
Laura, thank you. I'll stab at a couple of those, and some of them are, you know, you and I had the privilege of working with you for a number of years, so you'll know that most of this is over my head. So I'll try to answer that, which I understand. The question of access, you know, was approached two ways. One, if you read the LOI and eventually definitive agreement, they're going to contractually obligate themselves, so to speak, to what New Hanover Regional Medical Center does as far as allowing access. But that's a small part of it. In due diligence, we went to some of the hospitals that they have partnered with, they have merged with, and asked them about that question. And they just spoke glowingly about Novant's openness to all the physicians, whether it's theirs or the outside. So we're pretty confident that not only contractually, but in the way they go about doing business, that's a fundamental part of their DNA. At least that's what we felt from due diligence. All existing contracts will be honored, whether it's with Duke. You know, the New Hanover Regional Medical Center physicians are managed through an arrangement with Atrium right now, which, as you can tell, that could be awkward. And they've agreed to honor that. But they've also said that if Atrium chooses to change their mind, that they will accept that. So I think it's in there. It appears to us through our due diligence that it's in their DNA to be very open to all physician groups. That's my layperson's perspective.
These would actually not be existing contracts that I'm talking about. I'm talking about physician groups that may contract between themselves and Duke or other medical centers to bring physicians from Duke Medical down here to see people, and that happens with other groups as well. So those are not contracts that Novant would be asked to honor. My concern would be that those be allowed to still be existing. And I think more of the communities affected by those than maybe the PAG actually is aware of.
No, Laura,
and I just hope that as you proceed that you take those into account so that you are not damaging access by people in the community for the future.
Laura, this is Barb.
See.
Can you hear me, Laura?
Yeah, a little bit.
Hey, sorry, this is Barb. I wanted to add a couple things because we are aware of it. I think the key to remember is that UNC, that relationship is an academic and graduate medical education affiliation. We obviously will have specialists throughout the country that will work with our physicians along the way. And all of that is going to be driven by the local board. Novant will not come in and say, you can't do this and you can't do that. So I feel confident that we will have those same relationships. UNC doesn't have all of the specialties, nor do they have the depth of specialties to necessarily take every patient we would need them to take. So I think you have to remember the commitment contractually is more for the academic side. And I think that's where it's going to be very important. You had a couple other questions though, and I've now forgotten what they were. Shoot, do you remember? What did we not answer for you?
Well, I think you pretty much addressed it. I wanted to ask it as a question, but also to make sure that you all were aware of that. And one of the things that was in UNC's proposal was that if they were not picked, they would in fact pull out of the area. And they have a number of relationships here that it would be detrimental to the community to lose, not the least of which is Southeastern AHEC.
Right.
So I would I would hope that they would, now that they are going to get the contract here, I hope they can avoid that happening by Duke or others that didn't get the contract. I didn't know till recently that Atrium was managing the NHRMC groups, but I've actually had an issue with getting records sent out. But I hope that they will be more open in spite of their statement that they would leave the market if they didn't get the contract.
Yeah, we were disappointed by their proposal.
I just want to be sure that somebody on the PAG is aware that that could be very significant to a large part of the population.
Agreed, completely.
Thank you.
Cleve, I hate to do this, but I have a 2 o'clock Zoom. So I'm going to have to depart shortly.
Thanks for being here, Hannah.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But this has been...
we have 2 more people making comments or questions, so we probably will end with that, but we'll take it for a few minutes more. Let's go to Matt. Matt, your iPad has raised its hand, so please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Well, my question is this. I don't feel that there has been the transparency that maybe some of the speakers feel that there has been with the PAG, et cetera. And as a part of that, because I'm an environmental health safety professional, what I have observed is the fact that, yes, indeed, you had a PAG that was basically handpicked by the hospital and supports that mission. So now it is incumbent upon the PAG to make their case to the people. And I'm really shocked that there was not more opportunity. And yes, I understand we have a pandemic situation going on. However, who is ultimately the individuals that are responsible? It's the people. And the people have been left out of the process categorically. So that's my statement. That's my comment. That's how I feel. And the PAG is going to have to do one hell of a job to convince people that this is the best approach. And polls do matter. Sorry about that, Spence, but polls do matter. And if that's the will of the people, by God, let's not proceed with this process.
Okay, our last remaining hand up is by Lynne Boney, who, of course, is chair of the program committee and put this together. First of all, Lynne, congratulations on putting not only this week, but last week also. It's great to have those 2 things back to back, and I salute you for having done that. So, Lynne, do you want to have the last word today?
Sure. I'm taking off my program chair hat, and so I'm just, not just, but I'm a Rotary member speaking. And I find that I agree with John Lyon. This has been a most interesting presentation. And I agree with Shug and with Spence that I was shocked for this topic to ever raise its head. I thought, where has this come from? However, listening to the presentation, I am very interested to learn that our hospital was behind the times, really. Spence's very informative message about the financial part of it was very interesting. And so I thank you very much for the very deep dive and all the work and time you spent on the message. And I find that I am now in favor of this. Very interesting. So, and I find that this is forward looking and not focused on the past and why do we need to change. And as a matter of fact, I find that it's change is necessary if we want to keep up with what's happening and what's been happening. I see it in my industry every day. It's crazy. So anyway, thank you all.
Let me echo that. We're down to about 24 participants right now, and I don't believe Robbie Collins is still on the line, but I do want to thank everybody for being here, and thank you for your patience, and thanks for all the information and all the questions that we've gotten. And so to our Rotarians, we've already had the 4-way test, so I'll just simply say goodbye, and we'll see you via Zoom next week. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.